Hi, I'm Giles Martin. I'm here in Abbey Road Studio 2. I was actually born in 1969 on John Lennon's birthday, which fascinated him. He said to my dad, "No, you're not sort of arsehole he's going to turn out to be." It's funny, growing up as a kid, having a father like George Martin, you can't compare it to anything else. I've never actually swapped dads with anyone. But we didn't necessarily, myself and my sister didn't necessarily grow up in a terribly musical house, apart from, as a kid, I noticed my dad played the piano a lot, and odd people would come back and forth. In fact, when I was a playgroup, they went around the class, and I was about 4 or 5, and they said, what do your parents do for a living? And they, my dad's an accountant, my dad's a lawyer, my dad's a truck driver, whatever. And I said, my dad just sits at home and plays the piano. And it turns out he was writing, I think he was writing the music for Live and Let Die, the film at the time. And there's huge embarrassment amongst my parents. They go, he's not employed, he's got a proper job. And so it wasn't a sort of thing. I think growing up I didn't necessarily grow up in a musical household. It wasn't, I had the privilege of meeting people like Paul McCartney at an early age and meeting, the Beatles at an early age, but they were just friends of my parents. It didn't mean a whole lot to me as a kid. I remember when I became interested in the guitar and became interested in songwriting, Paul did say to me, he was incredibly encouraging. He goes, "That's great, I find it difficult to write songs, and I'm Paul McCartney." So I did have a privileged sort of background as far as that goes. My parents were always very wary of me getting a proper job. I learned to play the guitar, as some people might be able to see, quite badly. But behind my parents' back, it was a thing, don't join the music industry. I'm delighted I did. In fact, I really got involved in music because my dad started to lose his hearing when I was about 16, and he needed a second pair of ears, and he didn't really want to tell people he was losing his hearing, so I became his ears to a certain extent. I'd come in and try and help him. Through that, I would learn off him, and we started working together. And it was actually a great thing because I was needed to a certain extent by him, which is nice as a son and a father working together. At the same time, he was always very good. He never had a sort of "that's my boy" kind of attitude. He was always very receptive to my ideas. And in fact, he's been receptive to people's ideas throughout the whole of his career. And he treated me no differently and was always open to my suggestions, however wrong they may be. And God knows I made lots of wrong ones. So it gave me a chance to learn, and gave me a chance to respect him for what he does and what he's done. I never I was never any good at learning songs off by heart. I mean, I bluffed my way through most things. I've never been terribly accurate at playing anything. I can play a number of things very badly, but I was much more interested in playing for a reason. So as soon as I learned to play the guitar with a friend of mine, we started playing in the underground here, started playing in tube stations. Playing whatever songs we could learn, basically, as you do. And my dad was especially distraught by this. He didn't want, George Martin's son being arrested because it's illegal. At that stage, it was illegal to busk. In fact, the way we played it should have been illegal, but it was illegal to busk. And I then got into playing bands. I formed a band, as you do, and I had a great time. I think playing in a band, learning to play an instrument, learning to play a guitar was the best thing I ever did. And not that I practice the guitar or play it very often now, but it opens so many doors as far as if you're willing to play it to people, if you're willing to bore people with it. It's great, to meet people and chat. It's like a great hobby to have. It's better than video games, for instance. And I think that being in a band taught me more about recording and music, fun enough, than being the son of George Martin did. Because if you're the son of someone, people expect you have this knowledge, which generally you don't have. People think you grew up in recording studios. Of course, I'd spent more time in studios than probably other people are 16, but it's still just a row of buttons. If you're 16, it's still just, a compressor. Of course, I know what a compressor does. I hadn't got a clue for a long time because people expect you to know these things. But if you're in a band, especially as I was in an unsuccessful band, you have a chance to make a whole lot of mistakes and learn stuff. And the hardest thing, not that it's a bad thing, but the hardest thing if you're a son of someone famous or a child of a famous person is you don't get that many chances to make mistakes before people go. People are hoping for the second coming. People are going, he's going to be just like his dad. And if you screw up, you're then the other way. He couldn't get a proper job. And so being in a sort of hidden band gave me a chance to learn. And that's what, music is about evolving. It's about discovering new stuff. It's about learning new songs. It's about learning how things work. It's not about playing the same old things every day, then things become boring. After playing in a band, I carried on playing I always played with people, always like going on tour and playing in pubs and clubs. So I thought it was just great fun. And I started writing jingles, I started writing commercials. I started doing gasoline adverts. That was for France. French gasoline was the peak of my life. And that was when I was at university. And then when I left university, I wanted to become a record producer. I wanted to write music for people and produce people, but I couldn't. I didn't have any, what do? You can't go, I'm the son of George Martin, let me produce you, or give me a job. And so I ended up working in press. And at the same time, I started looking at bands. And funny enough, my dad was he was nervous, I think, of me following in his footsteps at this stage. And I saw a band called My Life Story. They're playing My Life Story. They're playing at the Astoria in London. And I went to go see them play, and I thought they were good. And they had a whole lot of strings, and I did an arrangement of them and produced them. And they released a single that became sort of #1 in Melody Maker and Enemy and the Cool magazines. And someone showed it to my dad and said, look what your son's been up to. And I was just doing it in the evenings, as you do if you're a fan of music and you want to get into music. And that kind of opened doors for me. I left the press job and became a producer. Production engineering is something that you learn stuff all the time with, like any sort of music. I mean, I think for me, starting out and how I am now, if I can work in any form of music, I'm happy. It doesn't matter. It's just, I think I produce more stuff now and remix and mix stuff now, probably because in a way it's what people expect of me, and maybe I'm okay at it. The Love project came from the fact that they needed to do a show. It was George Harrison and Guy Liberté, who's the head of Cirque du Soleil, were friends. And they decided to do a show, and they decided they couldn't have anyone singing Beatles songs a la Mamma Mia. They didn't want, a chorus singing Hey Jude on stage. And I think that's the right decision. And so they approached my dad, and I'd just had quite a lot of success in the UK doing classical stuff at the time. And Apple came to see me, and I sat with my dad and talked to them about it. And I said to them, I could try creating a gig that never happened. And Neil Aspinall, who was the head of Apple, said, I'd love, we talked about, because he was their roadie, we talked about their shows. We talked about, starting off with Long Tall Sally and finishing with Twist and Shout, or, creating the thing. And I said, well, listen, with Pro Tools and digital stuff, I can perhaps create a gig that never happened. So, under complete secrecy, I went upstairs here into a very small room and took some material, and I took at the beginning, the drums from the end, and Get Back, because I realized they're the same tempo, and because I thought I'd start a gig, never happened, with a drum solo going into a song, and started moving things around, and people said mashing up. I always thought it was a bit rude. And then thought, how am I going to start this? And got the piano from A Day in the Life and turned that backwards, because I thought if that makes a good ending, it'll make a good beginning as it sucks into the chord from Hard Day's Night. I just had fun, And my view was, if I can impress my dad doing Beatles stuff, then that's pretty good. As a son, you're always trying to impress your dad, I think, or compete in some way. And it just so happened that it was on Beatles stuff, and I was auditioning for the Beatles. And I really thought that they probably wouldn't like it. I really thought people would think this is a really bad idea. It sounds like a bad idea if you just talk about it. And I then took Within You, Without You and Tomorrow Never Knows and stuck those together, because I thought this will definitely get me fired, if nothing else. And they came and they really liked it. They liked the ideas. And so I ended up becoming the sort of legacy which I kind of fought against for a long time. And here I am now in Abbey Road talking about it. Suddenly became part of it, and I backed up all the catalogue onto Pro Tools and started working on this project, which became Love. I came with my dog Stan and went to my room and started working. We had a list. I worked with the director of the show and my dad. My dad would come in 2 days a week, and I'd play him ideas and we'd work through stuff. So he was kind of producing me doing it. But the bosses were the Beatles, Ringo and Paul, and Olivia Harrison and Yoko Ono, who were representing George and John. And it was important that they liked everything. They had to hear everything before it was passed on anywhere else. And the interesting thing about the Beatles, it's such a protected circle, rightfully so, that if you do something and no one likes it, no one ever hears it. You know, and that's actually quite a good thing for me, because it means I could take risks. You know, occasionally people at Abbey Road were sort of, you know, people who hadn't heard anything, which the majority of people here, didn't like the idea of what we were doing, and didn't like the idea of me coming in and changing. People think it's changing history, but it's not, because I'm not deleting anything. I wasn't, you know, I was just really trying to do something different. And Ringo and Paul would come in. The funny thing is they come and listen to stuff, and they're not allowed to take stuff away either. It's not like you give them a CD. The only chance of them listening to the new mixes we were doing was by coming here and listening to them. And then later, as we got the technology sorted out and secure drives were done, I would go and see Yoko and sit down with her and work through stuff. And it's fascinating. For me, it was fascinating because I have no past with them. You know, I certainly wasn't there at the time. And so it's kind of on an even, I'm way down the pecking order, but it's kind of, I meet on an even keel, as it were. There's no history. I have no, you know, experience of anything they did. So it was quite easy for me just to go, do you like it, or what don't you like about it? And they were very proactive in it, all four of them, you know, the two wives and Ringo and Paul. You know, Paul was the one that would give me the fear, because he's such a good musician. I mean, Ringo's a pretty good musician as well, and they'd you know, they know their stuff and they know their own material. And occasionally, in fact, when we were doing the show, I sat down with Paul and I went through each bit and, you know, played in bits in the theatre, and it was great. It was a great evening. And he goes, you know, he said to me, you know, I'd have to say I really like what you've done, and what you've done has been sympathetic with my music, and I really appreciate that. For me, that was just, you know, the best. But when it came to the opening of the show, at the very beginning, when people walk into the theatre and they're sitting down, I couldn't work out because they wanted Beatles music to play, and someone said, well, why don't you just do another 60 minutes of, and I mean, it took me 2 years to do the 90 minutes. So I decided to get as many Beatles on as I could by taking the vocals off, which is difficult with Beatles stuff because there's so much leakage on the tracks, and just play the backing tracks. So it's like the Beatles are playing, they're backing as you walk in. So you have Dear Prudence with no vocal, you know, you have Should Have Known Better with no vocal, and Penny Lane with no vocal. And the idea was that it would counterpoint Because. When Because starts, it's just vocals. So I'm sitting with Paul, and my dad's there and Paul's there, and Penny Lane's playing in the ceiling of the theatre. And Paul goes, and what's this then? And I went, it's Penny Lane. Because I know it's bloody Penny Lane, but what's it doing in the ceiling? And I said, well, I just thought it'd be an idea to, you know, because they listened to everything. I thought it'd be an idea to maybe put the backing tracks up there. And he's like, oh, okay, you know, I'll have a listen. And it's right there, because it is their music. And, you know, and my dad sometimes, you know, he feels embarrassed because it's not his music, and it certainly isn't mine. It is theirs. There were 4 Beatles, and it was their band, and that was it. There's no 5th Beatle. With music, there's things you'd like to do. I wish I could play things better. You know, I've always thought, you know, it'd be great to really learn how to play the bass properly, or guitar properly, or piano properly. You know, but it's just a question of time. Maybe I'll start watching our video tunes and then become a better musician. But you know, I'd like to, you know, work with, you know, a really good young band. At the same time, I'd love to go and do something like the Love Project with something else, you know, with taking stuff and creating, make people listen to music again. The good thing about Love is people do analyze it, people do listen, and people don't have it on the background, they do actually get into it. And that's why we do music. We do music because we're passionate about it. And so, really, I mean, I'm about to write a television thing, you know, it's a question of writing, producing, and being creative. And anything that lets you do that, you take. And every day, I just can't believe I can do this for a living. You know, I was told by my parents for years it's an impossible job to do for a living, despite coming from my background, because I think maybe when I have kids, I'll be doing the same thing. You know, don't go into music. You know, but you do it because you love it, and if you can get paid for it, it means you don't have to do another job to get in the way as well. So it's fantastic. I would say to anyone learning an instrument, anyone, you know, struggling, because let's face it, we all struggle with instruments all the time, and we struggle with music. is that no matter how hard it is, it's hard for everyone. And that love that you have for it, never let go of it, because you might be trying to learn a song and go, I'm never going to learn this. But the fact of it is, you do learn, and you do move on. And the thing to do is never ever give up, never ever lose that drive and that feeling you get when you work something out or you hear some great music, because it's much better than sitting down and watching the telly. I mean, the thing about music is that I think if anyone's toured, I used to tour a lot. You end up kind of working on automatic pilot, and you start amusing yourself with stuff. I was playing bass in a band, and you start playing the same things over and over again. And I was once in Germany, and I used to jump off the stage, and I jumped off the stage, and I had no idea until I left the how far I was jumping. We played the end of the concert, and I jumped off the stage, and there was no crowd there. I mean, let's face it, we weren't that popular, but there was a break before the people. And I launched off the stage, and seeing the band's faces, and they looked at me, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die in a shit club in Germany. And I dropped about 12 feet. My bass amp almost followed me, because I didn't have wireless or anything. The bass, it was like Wile E. Coyote. My lead unraveled. It was the only thing that kept me alive. And an Ampeg SV200 or they called came crashing down afterwards. But yeah, I spent most of my time being laughed at by people. I think it's important. I think it's important in studios to have a good laugh. It's funny, I mean, it's the Beatles. It's one thing that was shocking for me from listening to all of the tapes, everything they did, was not how serious it was. It was how much kind of fun there is in the tapes. Even when you think, oh, the White Album they didn't get on, they're really cracking up most of the time. And it's kind of, you forget that actually they came to the studio to have a good time, and all the other stuff you read about happened in offices and accountants and all that sort of stuff. Most of the studio stuff is great. And that's the thing about music. Music should be fun. If you're learning music, have a laugh with it, and don't sit on your own and do it. Find someone to play with, because the great thing about music is there's always someone worse than you. I mean, in my case, you really have to hunt them out, but there is, and so show off to someone. Well, the great thing about the internet is the fact you can delve into the world of songs and work out chords. And one of the problems I struggle from is you look on the internet, and quite often the chord sheets are wrong. There's some guy going, if you know the right way this song goes, please write in. You think, oh, that's no good. I can work that out. And the great thing about iVideo tunes is it breaks down that barrier, and you're suddenly being taught by professionals. You're suddenly being taught in a simple way by professionals. It's kind of inspired me. I saw iVideo tunes before I got involved in it, and it's inspired me to going, right, I'm going to see if I can learn the piano better now. And I think that's a great thing. People don't have access to the best people in the world, and now with iVideo tunes they do. You can be taught by some of the best people, from home, and the way it's shot and the way it's done is very simple. If I can understand it, it's very simple. So I think it's a great thing. It's a great learning tool for people, and I think hopefully it'll create great musicians in the future. Hi, I'm Giles Martin. I'm here at Abbey Road Studio 2 to talk about A Day in the Life. A Day in the Life was recorded in January 1967. It's one of the great Beatles songs, and has a great combination of writings with John and Paul. Really, it shows that they wrote separately in a way. And the song was started by John playing the acoustic guitar very simply, just up and down strokes. And they did a take with this and Paul playing piano, Ringo playing shaker or maracas, and George just very quietly playing bongos. And as it's well known, well documented, to begin with they had no idea what the middle of the song would be. And they played around it, and then Paul realized he had a section, the got up, got out of bed section, that they were going to insert in the song. So as they worked on the song in the studio, they then recorded it with this. And the only thing they could do to get from one to the other is have 24 bars of nothing. In fact, they had 24 bars of Mal Evans, the roadie, counting from 1 to 24 down here, and Paul playing, marking time on the piano, building up. I think in his mind, because the idea of having the orchestral crescendo was his, I think in his mind he perhaps had that idea in mind, knowing him, but that's the way the song was constructed. And so really on one track you have what's called the rhythm track on the 4-track tape. And the rhythm track is piano, guitar, shakers and bongos. And that's the song. On top of this, John then overdubbed his vocal. And with tape delay. And he did a few vocal passes, did 3 vocal takes, and they chose the best one. And they bounced the whole lot onto another 4-track. And the reason why they did this is because they were going to add drums and bass. And it's a classic Beatles thing. It's a classic thing. I think it's a great way of recording is to put the drums on and the bass on much later. Because nowadays we're so constrained by drums. I mean, since the 80s, really, in the late 70s, we recorded stuff where the drums are everything. The drums are, you know, let's bass around things around drums and vocal, but you can create subtlety if you don't bass things around drums. The rhythm came from, actually the rhythm came from the rhythm of John Lennon more than anything else. And the fact that there was a shaker going on, a swung shaker going on, meant that his straight guitar could just mark out time. And then on this means that Paul had room to move his bass line around, to swing his bass line, to play around with crotchets and quavers and see which bits he wanted to play more and which bits he wanted to play less. And this, I think, then inspired Ringo to do a drum part. Because he had that shaker going on, he could do a drum part which didn't mark out time. He does stuff which is sparse, and as everyone knows, he's a left-hand drummer playing a right-handed drum kit. Almost played fills backwards to a certain extent. And the drums and bass, actually, I've soloed them in isolation. They're just quite extraordinary. They sound like they're from, it sounds wrong, which I think is always a good thing. If you listen to them on their own, it doesn't sound like it's part of any song. And the song being built like this meant that everything could be based around the voice. And if a band you're playing anything, you know, always play around the singer. And you'll notice that the drums fill in around the voice. The voice doesn't have to sing over any drums. And you can hear that in the song. What happened with Day in the Life is about a week after they recorded the original drum and bass, I think they replaced it. Paul and Ringo came back in and replaced the whole take. No one knows what the original one was like because it was wiped. But you know, who knows? It's pretty good. Once this was done, they were then in a situation where, for the first time in the Beatles' history, they recorded an orchestra. Originally, I think, Paul wanted 90 musicians, and they ended up with 50. I think it was a lot of money, you know, and you know, they're under a strict budget. And so it was Paul's idea to have this orchestral orgasm, if you like. He wanted the sound of a jet plane taking off. And it was recorded in Studio One, just across the corridor, with my father and with Paul conducting, taking turns. And they got the Beatles invited, because of the first time they had a symphony orchestra in the studio, they invited all their, you know, friends, cronies. They had the Rolling Stones came, Marianne Faithfull was here, some of the Hollies were here, you know, that sort of 60s scene came. And they dressed up the orchestra. They had the leader playing with a monkey's paw in his hand. They had red noses. They had balloons popping out. You know, it was like a colourful 60s scene. And they actually recorded. My dad wanted to slave up tape machines now, which means you're running more than one 4-track tape machine at the same time. The first time this has been done. And he demanded, there's a guy called Ken Townsend he became head of Abbey Road, but he was the chief technical guy. He came up with all the tape loops for the way they were going to do the tape loops for Tomorrow Never Knows, for instance, was him. And they linked the 2 tape machines together, and they recorded 3 parts of the orchestra, which they then bounced. So Paul got his wish, because in the end, what you're hearing on A Day in the Life is 1 track, but 3 parts of orchestras. I'm not sure if the orchestra know this, because they'd have to pay them treble if they knew that. And so what you have is a song that is a huge combination of a number of different ideas from a number of different people, but it's mainly John and Paul at their creative peaks. And it's funny, you know, you hear things like, you know, listen to the rhythm track. You hear things, if you listen very carefully to the orchestral break, which happens after Paul's middle section, you hear sort of a snort or and it happens in the big chord sequence. And that's just John giggling when they're recording it. And it's those sort of things that make up a recording. We're so keen nowadays on trying to eradicate mistakes, trying to tune vocals, trying to put things in time, trying to quantize stuff, we're dehumanizing music. And A Day in Life is genius in its nature, and therefore maybe not human, but it's also very human. You have someone laughing and sniffing halfway through what people perceive to be a very, very serious song. The other thing about A Day in Life is funny. I mean, things like, if you listen to the vocals in the instrumental section, the R's, which John's singing. When we did the Cirque du Soleil show and did the album, the Love album, I wanted those to be, you know, big. I always remember them being huge. And of course, A Day in Life is a big song, but when you put it into its 4 tracks, it's not big in today's terms. And it's one of those R's, you have Paul singing a strange falsetto. I mean, I think they're a little bit worse for wear when they're doing it. Singing a strange falsetto for the whole thing. And if you listen closer to the track, you can hear the sort of ooh going on in the background. And it's Paul. And you think, is that really on tape? It's one of those things you lift up the fade and you think, does that really exist on the master version? To finish the song, they'd reached this orchestral peak, which went nowhere. And I think on the anthology, on the second anthology, there was a great version where the orchestral peak stopped and you hear nothingness, and you hear Paul talking about, you know, it was an idea to be avant-garde, all this sort of stuff. But they originally tried to finish it with a massed hum. As they had all their mates in the studios, they wanted everyone to hum a chord of E at the end. And it ended up in hysterics. They just didn't work. It was like it was pathetic. It was you know, as we said, a fart in a thunderstorm. It really was. It was not worth it at all. So they came up with the idea much later on, about a week later, putting doing the pianos on. And so this huge piano chord you have, originally it was 3 of them. I think Mel Evans was involved, and Paul and Ringo. They played 3 pianos on one tape, and I think they did that twice, or maybe 3 times in the 3 tracks. But it's funny. It was only when I listened to this. So you have the piano chord on 4 tracks, on all the tracks, because there's nothing else going on at the time. It's funny. My dad added harmonium. There's a Wurlitzer in there, and this famous piano chord is actually made up of different elements, and it shows again. This song shows how they'd moved on from having stock sounds on records, and they started creating their own sounds. Today we have synthesizers and we have samplers and all that sort of stuff, and none is more interesting than create a bunch of frequencies that you can just invent from coloring things with different instruments. And that piano chord is such a great case in point. The piano chord is not a piano chord, it's a mass of frequencies that's created in the studios. And by playing a piano in the chord of E, it doesn't sound like that. So the way this chord was done, it's just a straight E major chord. Was you've imagined my hands and then another set of hands up here, and then 2 other pianos on each track playing the one chord. You have a pretty big sound there. And the hardest thing for them was all of them playing in time. I think it took about, on take 7, they managed to all play the thing in time at the same time. And as the piano died away, Jeff Emmerich up in the studio had to turn up the gain higher and higher and higher in order to create the sustain. I think they got it to about 55 seconds. So in the end, they had to remain completely quiet in the studio because the gain was so high. If anyone had moved, it would have erupted in the speakers. And you can hear a chair squeak and stuff like that. Not surprisingly. I mean, if you're mic'd up that loud, it's going to happen. So that's how they created the end of A Day in Life. A Day in the Life has a very simple guitar rhythm to it, which I'll try and play. It's, if you can imagine the shaker playing a swung time around it, A Day in the Life starts simple guitar strumming, G, B minor, E minor to an E minor seventh, C. That's the introduction. Then the verses are G, B minor, E minor, E minor seventh, C, E minor, A minor, G, B minor, E minor to E minor seventh, C to an F, E minor, C to an F, back to a C again. And so that's the pattern of A Day in the Life. I mean, the thing to watch out for really with it is the fact that it kind of has an emphasis on the upstroke. It's almost like, I mean, that's overemphasizing it, but that's kind of the feel he's giving. Once the introduction is done, there's that sort of skip that's happening on. And this is quite characteristic of Beatles stuff, is that quite often the downbeat, there's a hole in the downbeat, which is filled in later, and the offbeat is always there.
This is the introduction to A Day in the Life by the Beatles. It's in the key of G major and it's in standard tuning. And you use some very basic chord voicings here that are just slightly altered, just a little bit different than what you may be used to. Let's take a look at the intro. The first thing you notice is the eighth note strum pattern. You just strum on the downbeat. You strum down, getting essentially the bottom three strings, the sixth, the fifth, and the fourth strings. And then on the upbeat, you strum back up, really focusing on the first three strings, the first, the second, and the third. 1 and 2, and so our first chord is G major. Take your second finger and you're going to place it on the third fret of the sixth string, and your first finger is going to go on the second fret of the fifth string. Your third finger is going to go on the third fret of the first string. So give that 2 beats. Next up is B minor. And the voicing in this song is just slightly different. You bar all the way across all 6 strings here at the second fret. So you get that F sharp. So again, all the way across all 6 strings here at the second fret. Add your third finger to the fourth fret of the fourth string, your pinky to the fourth fret of the third string, and your second finger is going to go on the third fret of the second string. Give that 2 beats. Same strum pattern. Next up is E minor. Your second finger is going to go onto the second fret of the fifth string. Third finger is going to go onto the second fret of the fourth string. And you're going to give that a 2 beats. And actually at the intro of the song, you kind of hammer on the chord. So lift up your fingers out of the position, just kind of hovering over the string so the strings ring open. And on the first strum, strum it open and then immediately hammer the chord back on. And that's just that first time through in the intro. Next, he alters this E minor to make it an E minor 7 for the last 2 beats of the measure. Add your pinky to the third fret of the second string. Just do that for 2 beats. And then we end on C. We resolve on C. And this voicing is slightly different in that it adds the G here at the third fret of the sixth string over top of the whole chord. So take your first finger and place it at the first fret of the second string, your second finger at the second fret of the fourth string, third finger is going to go on the third fret of the sixth string, and your pinky is going to go on the third fret of the fifth string. Strum all 6 strings, and you're going to do this in that 8th note strum pattern for 2 measures or 8 beats. So let's listen to the whole intro. That's the intro. Let's take a look at the verses next. Let's take a look at the verses for A Day in the Life. For our purposes, there are two of what we'll describe as verses before the orchestral section kicks in, the bridge kicks in, and then you have your final verse. And the first verse will start out with the lyric, "I read the news today." And the second verse will start with the lyric, "I saw a film today." So let's listen to the first verse. So we start out with the same first two measures as from the intro. G for 2 beats, B minor for 2 beats. Remember this B minor voicing, you've got that F sharp here on the 6th fret, 6th string, 2nd fret. E minor for 2 beats, then E minor 7. Now we have C for 2 beats. Remember this voicing of C, you have your 3rd finger here on the 3rd fret of the 6th string and your pinky goes onto the 3rd fret of the 5th string. So C for 2 beats. A G chord with a B bass, take your 2nd finger here and place it onto the B at the 2nd fret of the 5th string. Strum everything but the top string, the 6th string. Do that for 2 beats. And then we're going to resolve to an A suspended 2nd. 2nd finger onto the 2nd fret of the 4th string, and your 3rd finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Strum all except for the 6th string, and do that for 4 beats. Back to G major for 2 beats, B minor for 2 beats, E minor for 2 beats, E minor 7, C for 2 beats, now F for 2 beats. Take your 1st finger and fret all the way across all 6 strings here at the 1st fret. 3rd finger is going to go on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, pinky on the 3rd fret of the 4th string, and your 2nd finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So 2 beats for that guy. E minor for 2 beats. And now we're going to do a different voicing of E minor 7. Just lift up your 3rd finger from the 2nd fret of the 4th string and let the 4th string ring open. But keep your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. So E minor. Next up is C, 2 beats, F, 2 beats, E minor, 2 beats, C for 2 beats, G major for 2 beats, B minor, 2 beats, E minor, E minor 7 for 2 beats, C, G with a B bass, then A suspended 2nd for 4 beats. Back to G for 2 beats, B minor, E minor for 2 beats, E minor 7, C, F, E minor, And this time the E minor 7 voicing, where you just lift up your third finger and keep that fourth string open. And then C for 4 beats. Next, we're at the second verse. It begins with the lyric, "I saw a film today." And the second verse is the exact same arrangement as the final verse. So keep that in mind during the performance. Let's give it a listen. And the piano and the orchestra take over, creating the tension that we'll release when we get to the bridge. So let's learn it. Start out with the G for 2 beats, B minor for 2 beats, E minor for 2 beats, E minor 7, C, G with the B bass, and then resolve to A suspended second for 4 beats. Now this time, on the and 4 and, you want to put some accents, strum it a little bit harder than you normally would. So let's give that a listen. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So just on that and 4 and. One more time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So back to G for 2 beats. B minor for 2 beats. E minor. E minor 7, C for 2 beats, F for 2 beats, E minor, the E minor 7 voicing where you just have the 4th string open, then C for 4 beats, and then we're going to do C for half a measure, just 2 beats or 4 strums. And at that point, you let the orchestra take over, and you head over to the bridge.
Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head.
After the second verse in the loud orchestral section, an alarm clock will signify that it's time for the double time bridge section. And this part is mostly piano driven, but you will hear a small, tiny little acoustic guitar kind of jangling in the background. And we're going to take a look at what that's doing here. After the vocal starts, we have 3 bars of E, but you don't really hear a guitar going. The guitar doesn't come in until after those 3 bars of E, and you hear a D suspended second chord. Your first finger is going to go onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and your 3rd finger is going to go onto the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. You're going to strum the first 4 strings, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you have that 4th string and the 1st string ring open. So we'll just kind of loosely do that for 2 bars or 8 beats. So I'm going to go to E, and things tighten up considerably on the E chord. Put your first finger onto the 1st fret of the 3rd string, 2nd finger onto the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and your 3rd finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Do that for 4 beats, just real tight and staccato. Use your palm to just kind of mute it after each strum. Let go of the chord just slightly after each strum, just to not let it ring over the other beats. And then we're going to go to a B7. So put your 2nd finger onto the 2nd fret of the 5th string, 1st finger onto the 1st fret of the 4th string, 3rd finger onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and your pinky is going to go onto the 2nd fret of the 1st string. There's no 6th string at all, so avoid that. We're going to alternate between hitting the bass note and the chord. So hit the 5th string, then strum the chord, 5th string again, and then strum the chord. Back to E major for 4 beats, 1 bar, real tight. And then back to B7. And then just kind of do B7 for another bar. And straightforward staccato. So back to E for 3 bars. Then to the D suspended second, real loose for 2 bars. Back to the E 4 beats, 1 bar. And then 1 more to the B7, but this time we're just going to hit the bass and let it ring. Back to the E for 4 beats, 1 bar, tightened up. And then B7 for 1 bar, tight. So let's hear it. And at this point, the song changes its tone back to the original tone from the John Lennon vocal. And it definitely has a chord progression, although you can't hear the acoustic guitar in the background. But let's look at the chord progression. We won't hear it in the performance, but you'll see me fingering it. And the chord progression will work if you want to play along with that section. So it starts out with the C with that G bass, same one we've done throughout the song, for 1 bar, 4 beats. And then G for 1 bar, 4 beats. D major. Put your first finger onto the first fret, or the second fret of the 3rd string. Second finger goes onto the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and your 3rd finger goes onto the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. Strum the first 4 strings, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then A major for 4 beats, 1 bar. Second finger onto the 2nd fret of the 4th string, 3rd finger onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and your pinky goes on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. Strum everything except for the 6th string. Then E major for 4 beats, 1 bar. Back to C, 4 beats. G, 4 beats. D, 4 beats. A, 4 beats. Now we resolve E, 2 beats. C, 2 beats. So let's hear that all together. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you head back to the final verse, which is the same exact arrangement, down to the same accents on the A suspended second as the second verse. Once you get to the final C major chord, the final half measure of that C major chord, you can just let the orchestra kick in and take over. There's no more acoustic guitar to be found in the rest of the tune. So congratulations, you've learned A Day in the Life. This is the performance of A Day in the Life by the Beatles.
And though the news was rather sad, woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. Found my way downstairs and drank a cup, and looking up, I noticed I was late. Found my coat and grabbed my hat, made the bus in seconds flat. Found my way upstairs and had a smoke. Somebody spoke and I went into a dream.